Welcome to Cyber Soul, the podcast where we dive deep into the digital chaos, explore the messy truths behind cybersecurity, and ask the questions no one else seems to be asking. I'm your host, Keelin Conant, and around here, we don't pretend to have all the answers. What we do have is curiosity, bold conversations, and a mission to understand how we stay secure and human in a world that feels increasingly hacked, digitally and emotionally. Each week, we sit down with the people building, breaking, defending, and redefining the future. Whether it's quantum computing, ransomware, disinformation, or the people behind the breach, we're going there. So buckle up. It's time to dig beneath the firewalls and into the soul of cyber. Welcome to Cyber Soul, the podcast where we get real about the stories behind the scene, where cybersecurity, leadership, and humanity collide. I'm your host, Keelin Conant, and today we're diving into a part of the cyber crisis that doesn't get enough airtime: communication. Because a ransomware attack doesn't just hit your servers, it hits your brand, your team, and your customers' trust. Join me today is Cara Stewart, CEO of Wunder Marx, and a powerhouse in crisis communications, persuasion, and reputation strategy. She's helped shape the narrative of dozens of high-growth companies in some of the most vulnerable moments. Cara, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being here.
Keelin, thank you so much for having me. I'm really proud to be here for Wunder Marx.
So let's start here. Where did you go from journalist to founder of one of the boldest persuasion agencies out there? And how did cyber become part of your world?
Yeah, that's such a nice question. Thank you. I was a reporter with the Orange County Register, and as you can imagine, as a reporter, learned a lot about crisis communications. Of course, I was covering it, everything from the Orange County of Orange bankruptcies to some of the beginning stages of events like the Y2K incident and what that actually could be, and learned a lot from that and decided to then flip my hat and actually step on the other side of the table as a communications expert helping to shape organizational communications. And at the time, I ended up working for what became a Fortune 50 worldwide technology distribution company. And from there, went into a series of tech startups where I was responsible for not only shaping public perception, but handling the communications for customers, for supply chains, and of course for journalists. And any company over the past several decades has had to understand the risks relating to their digital footprint and cybersecurity and what it means, the ramifications for their customers' data and other data within their supply chain. So naturally, communications being really an executive function has always had, or should have always had, a seat at the table.
100%. So going back to the cyber part of it, why is crisis communication for cyber not just a PR bolt-on? Why does it deserve its own strategy?
Oh, sure. Well, if you think about it, cybersecurity is speaking to the heart of trust, and trust is a persuasion element. Um, if a company breaches a client's trust, whether it is cybersecurity or even a product failure, or simply does not do as they said that they're going to do in delivering a product or a service, communication comes into it. So we often have a seat at the table to be able to work with partners in three ways. One, we know something is going to happen. There are going to be cybersecurity incidents. So let's be proactive and make a plan for it. Two, during the incident, most companies are going to be heads down trying to resolve it, working with partners like yourself or their internal teams. Sometimes no one is managing the external communications, and it doesn't make sense to have that initial strike team try to do it. It really is something that should reside in the communications, sales, and marketing function, really those that are closest to the customers and closest to the industry and all the stakeholders. And then after the fact, while the technologists are figuring out and determining how to prevent that from happening, shoring up security, we go into trust rebuild mode to make sure that our community, customers, end users understand that this is unfortunately part and parcel of doing business in 2025 and beyond. but also that a company has taken steps to remediate, that they can rebuild trust, and that their security has been perhaps temporarily compromised, but to know that there is a plan in place to rebuild that trust.
Thank you for giving the whole overview and the outline. So let's go into a crisis timeline. What happens in the first 24 hours? In my understanding, the breach hits, what should leadership focus on? And then there's the internal communications, right? You talked about how to talk to our customers, but how do we talk to our employees? And then, the transparency versus liability. So I know that was a lot, and I'll guide you through each one. But that first 24 hours when the breach hits, what should leadership focus on first?
Yeah, definitely. There really is a lot to unpack because exactly as you said, there's so many stakeholders that can be affected from internal to external. And the most important critical part is not only within that first 24 hours, it's actually within the first 90 minutes. So we get to work immediately. Um, if you think about it in terms of triaging any emergency, the first priority is that internal coordination. So we need to make sure that leadership activates a crisis communications or a crisis response team. That has to include IT, it has to include legal, executive leadership, public relations, investor relations. The makeup of that's going to be a little bit different depending upon the company and its complexity, but those key players should be identified well in advance so when a crisis hit, they are ready to go. And they are the ones going to be responsible to understand the facts as it happened. What happened? What data has been affected, for example? What are the immediate actions that are going to be taken? And then communication gets to work with that coordinated team of drafting an initial holding statement to be able to communicate to all stakeholders, starting internally and radiating out to customers, again, investors, the media, supply chain partners. That complexion is a little bit different depending on the type of company, but you get the idea of where it is. And that is all really to establish one authority of we are aware of what's happening, we are committed to being transparent with the situation, and we will continue to communicate with you, knowing that the absolute worst thing that can happen, even worse than the data breach, is that silence, because that spreads fear, misinformation, and you lose credibility, you lose trust. And those kind of vacuum and the absence of leadership is where rumors and fear spreads. Finally, you also want to lock down the internal messaging. So that is not to say we clamp down all communications, but you have to be able to brief employees in a way so that they're able to know what to communicate and when. That's critically important because oftentimes employees will inadvertently try to be helpful by over communicating. But if they're not in the know of what's absolutely happening, they can actually start to spread rumors that backfire on them, that cause worse damage, and that further erode that trust. So that really has to happen within the first 90 minutes.
That's great. And then, the erosion of trust and the rumors, that also can lead to litigation, right? So what about transparency versus liability?
That's always a fine line to be able to walk. And that's why I always go back to if you're thinking about this in real time, you're losing the game already. So, what we always advise companies to do is to run tabletop scenarios ahead of time, where you actually physically, if possible, gather all of those key players again, executive team, leader, head of sales, head of marketing, crisis communications, your whole team around you, and of course, with IT to determine what are the possible types of breaches that could occur, who would be affected, what are the possible outcomes from them, how to solve this problem quickly as possible, and what to say for each type of scenario. This is a really intensive exercise, but documenting all of that can prevent that crisis, that the confusion that occurs at the moment of a breach or a data attack that happens.
How would you suggest, because I in almost all of the interviews that I've done, this topic comes up over and over again. It's prepare, 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 plan it out, run the tests. And, in a real world situation, I'm sure people are listening to this and saying, like, I don't even have time to eat lunch. So, how do you, suggest carving out time? Because these are important topics we're talking about. How do you suggest for your clients to carve out time to really, you know, create the preparedness that, is needed in case it happens?
It's true. Anytime I'm measuring investment, it's not only in dollars, but it's in the time spent. And the company profiles that we typically work with, the boards are even recognizing that this is such a liability that they're advising their companies in order to make sure they're carving out time. So, one way of doing that is to hire communications experts who can walk you through that process. They are ones that will organize the framework of such communications of really a crisis response team and can lead those tabletop scenarios in order to most efficiently and effectively walk executive teams and leaders through this process in a 1 or 2 day scenario planning, and then document that playbook and actually come in anytime from anywhere from once a quarter to twice a year, hopefully not waiting until annually, but at least annually, in order to run everyone through actual training exercises. That is probably the best cost-effective way to do it, as well as the less impact on staff time. Barring that, I do advise, I know some companies just work it into their quarterly planning process. So if you already have a company that has an annual planning process, very often they'll break those down into quarterly. And so it's something that is always added to an agenda, something that is always top of mind at key staff meetings and retreats.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for taking us through that, because I know time is very limited in our busy work schedules. However, when we go back and we review something that's already created, you're gonna get that time back when something happens. And unfortunately, at this point, it really is a matter of when, not if, right? So,
It is a matter of when, not if. And because these subjects are so top of mind, it's not even something that's only at a corporate level. My late 70s, early 80s something year old relatives can now speak fluently about credit card data breaches or about that their local vendor had a breach and call and say, what does it mean for me? So because these types of stories are in the news all of the time, consumers and B2B clients, government clients, all expect companies to have a plan in place. So really, it's kind of table stakes. You wouldn't launch a product without having documentation for it, or having a sales plan, or having a return policy. So it is no longer viable for a company not to have a crisis plan in place and a communications response in place for these type of cyber incidents, because they're going to happen. Data is going to be breached at some point.
right. And they're pretty much harvesting it right now, I'd say. So, preparing yourself sooner than later, it's not too late, I think is really important as well. So, okay, changing gears a little bit. Without naming names, can you share a cyber crisis where the comms were handled really well?
Sure, sure. We worked with I'll call it a mid-sized tech company last year that experienced a phishing-based data breach. and it affected about 3,000 customers. So total universe was not huge, but for this company, 3,000 customers was pretty substantial. So they wanted to make sure that they responded quickly. Fortunately, they already had some planning in place. Not to the level of actually having written communications, but they understood the total possible outcomes of it. They understood very quickly who they needed to communicate with. They already had that kind of chain of command in place. So within 90 minutes, they were able to call us. We very quickly worked with them to issue an internal memo and to advise again the employees. So that reduced the rumor mill. It gave the employees a feeling like their leadership team was actually in charge. And from there, the internal memo turned into an outward statement that their communications team posted to the company website and distributed a very brief but informative email to those customers who had been potentially impacted. And our job was really to help walk the client through the idea of, yes, we can be transparent and acknowledge that there was a breach, but explain what type of data could be compromised and provide immediate resources and steps customers could take in order to protect themselves. The reason this strategy worked so well is because there was a all hands on deck initiative, and the company culture honored the idea that this is significant, they must respond quickly, and everyone already knew how to work together. So you had transparency, you had speed, and you also had an empathy driven message. The messaging we worked on and the company, their client, approved recognized that they were not going to hide behind a lot of terminology and a lot of excuses. It was very empathetic of, we know we never wanted to write this email, you never wanted to receive this email, but this is the fact of what happened. It's not the end of the world. This is what we're doing to correct it and to protect your data. We ask you to take these steps too, and we're in it together. And because of that, they were able to minimize any impact and really didn't lose any customers about it. And after about a few days, they even stopped receiving any questions from customers about it. It became a non-issue.
That's awesome. That's really great. And I love that you pointed out there was empathy within the company, and the entire company already had a culture around knowing what to do in the case of this crisis. So, on the flip side of that, what's a common mistake you see over and over again?
Yeah, the flip side of that is if you go back to the three anchors of speed, transparency, and empathetic based human communications, um, gosh, there are thousands of examples of one, companies that pretend they're ostriches and hide their heads, try to skirt the law even and not even acknowledge what has happened, or try to cover it up. Or if they do finally respond, it is days or even weeks later. And there is nothing worse than receiving an email or communications from a company saying, yes, this occurred months ago. So you start to worry, what else have they been hiding from me? And then the third example of what not to do is to hide behind jargon and tech or act like it's no big deal. If customers don't want to be sold to, and being sold a story about their very private data turns them off, shockingly enough. We all want to be treated with respect. And if a
Yeah.
company is that cavalier about something, what else are they hiding? How else are they overcharging, for example? Are they giving us the right service? You start then to doubt the entire relationship and doubt the veracity of that company.
Those are really good points. Thank you for that. Okay, so I want to go into a lightning round, really quick but insightful. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and let's just see where it goes. Okay,
Okay.
and we can have fun with this for sure. What's a brand you think nails their communication, crisis or not?
Oh, there's so many brands that do it so well. On a retail side, Patagonia does, they understand their
Yeah.
customers, they do it so well. IKEA does a great job as well. They understand their corporate culture. Every employee is impeccably trained, and they are lightning fast in their communications, for example.
I, I love it. I love it. Okay, number two. What's a book or show that taught you something unexpected about persuasion
Oh, let's see here.
or the art of persuasion, I should say?
The art of persuasion. I really, oh, now we're gonna have true confessions here, right? I love binge
Real talk.
watching. Yep, I love binge watching crime dramas, and I'm a Gen X woman, so I grew up with also Sex and the City, for example, and starting to rewatch
Hmm.
them. So let me give you two things about persuasion. So just name any serial crime drama, Criminal Minds, for example. And persuasion there is trying, you think about how detectives and law enforcement try to get to the truth. Sometimes when you come across hot and heavy and have very aggressive direct communications, people shut down and stop listening and stop speaking. So being able to, again, speak to someone human to human, like friend to friend, you're going to get more information out of them, be able to persuade them and help them see your point of view. I think Sex and the City and now Just Like That also is a masterclass in persuasion. Of course, it's sublime in the ridiculous antics that everyone gets into, but understanding how to speak to pop culture, infuse it with humor always. Humor is one of the best ways to persuade because you're able to connect on a level that's not about facts and logic, but just makes you giggle. And if you can make someone feel an emotion like that, you've won them.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a fan of humor as well. And Sex and the City. Still, it still holds up to this day.
It really does.
Okay. It does. It's so fun. Okay. On a more serious note, what's one thing that keeps you up at night when it comes to communication and cybersecurity?
AI. I think like so many others,
Mhm.
AI is an amazing tool. In our agency, we use it for rapid idea generation, editing, to first line of research. Never stop there, of course. The hallucinations are real, and we are in the
Right.
business of original content and original ideation. But it is a time saver. The flip side of that is how many deep fakes have we seen? How much misinformation is spread because of it? Can we even trust that the voice that we are hearing or the video that we're seeing is true? So it is that proverbial two sides of the same coin. I blanking on the name of the band, but I'm reading a recent example of a band that is trying to restore their image because it turns out that an auto-generated caption that was appended to an Instagram post fabricated a story about them being connected to a white supremacy group and even
Oh.
wrote about a fake arrest of them and it was 100% fiction, really, really harmful fiction. But
Mhm.
now it's out there. And we all know that once something is online, it's there forever. And even if you get it removed, those who read the stories beforehand now have this false impression of a band. And
Yeah.
that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah. The AI deepfakes for sure. I mean, the spread of misinformation. I pride myself on being able to see, some of those videos. I'll look at it. People send me things, and I'm like, this doesn't look right. But it's getting better, and it's getting better quicker, quicker. So I agree 100%. So At CyberSoul, we believe even the most technical crisis is still about humans at the end of the day. We are, I'm here to make tech human again. I think you are too. Trust, emotion, reputation, responsibility all fall within that. So, Kara, when you look at where all this is going, the AI, the breaches, the deep fakes, misinformation, what gives you hope?
Humans, our creativity, our love for each other,
Mm.
our desire for a better future, our sense of innovation and exploration and adventure. I am not an overly Pollyanna, um, the sky is always blue and full of rainbows person.
I am
Well, no, but
trying
what
to
I mean
be.
by that is that there are going to be challenges. That's just the
Yeah.
reality of life. But I always do believe in humans to be able to overcome that. And I don't have to be overly optimistic about that. I can simply look at our past history. And there are always going to be those who forge ahead and who innovate and create something new and bring us together and are the leaders. So while things do keep me up at night, I also believe there are people like yourself who are willing to raise her hand and start a podcast and help guide us out in from the darkness into the light.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I agree, there's a lot of changes that are coming, whether we like it or not. We all feel it, we all see it. And I think, a healthy dose of optimism. I just
Yes.
love rainbows in general, right? But a healthy dose of the glass is half full, but there's still all this air to fill, I think is important. And people like yourself who are out there and putting yourself on the front line, that's a very uncomfortable place to be. So thank you for your service in doing that, from journalism to, your creative agency. Nowadays, it is hard to put ourselves out there because we don't know what's going to happen, just like with that band. We're going to have to get the name of that band. We'll put it in the show notes to
Yes, I'll get
to
that.
to make
I'll
sure we
link
get their name
to it.
cleaned up, at least in this
Exactly. We can link to it.
ecosystem.
But you know
Yeah.
what? A mentor told me very, very early in my career is that if I was comfortable, I wasn't growing. So,
Yep.
the best thing is to get used to being uncomfortable. And you know that
Uncomfortably comfortable.
yes, and that's where the magic occurs.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Kara, thank you for your wisdom, the honesty, and the reminder that how we communicate in a crisis might just matter as much as we do. For everyone listening, if your org lives online, your reputation does too. So just make sure, keep your eyes peeled out there. You can connect with Kara or learn more about Wunder Marx at wondermarx.com. Until next time, stay alert, stay human, and keep asking, in the middle of a breach, can we still lead with soul? I think we can because we're humans. Thank you again, Kara. We'll see you soon, okay?
Thanks, Keelan. Really appreciate you.